I've always been intrigued by something that I like to call the cross-cultural remake. When another culture does their take on a different country's character or property. And when it comes to Japan, there's really no shortage of these characters crossing the cultural boundaries. Just the fact that right now there is an American Kamen Rider book out is kind of fascinating. I've talked before about characters like Specter Man being written in Japan, but now I'm gonna go the other way. Very recently, there was an American comic series based on old Japanese properties from the 70s. This was an extremely odd choice to say the least, and I just had to know more. So join me as we dive into the rabbit hole that is P Productions and Specter Man Heroes. Today we'll be looking at the history of a production company that a lot of you have probably never heard of, but that's okay because I'll catch you up to speed really quick. Way back in 1966, a Japanese TV show called Ambassador Magma was unleashed onto the world. This was an adaptation of Osamu Tezuka's manga of the same name. Coming out a week before Ultraman, Ambassador Magma was the first tokusatsu show to be released in color, and it was the start of P Productions' foray into live-action television. What is P-Pro? Well, to answer that, I talked to Matt Frank, expert on all things kaiju-related and adjacent.
First off, my name is Matt Frank. I am a comic book artist and illustrator and writer. I have worked on quite a few properties, stuff that I've grown up with or been aware of as a kid, and I brute forced my way into working on those franchises. And P Productions, or P Pro, is a company from the 70s, mostly known for their production from the 70s. And I believe they were started by a manga artist, or they had a lot of manga artists heavily involved in the production side of things. And they were kind of a little bit like a Subaraya kind of company, where they were kind of a house of ideas. They were throwing stuff at the wall, just making different properties, different characters, and it was all original. Like, it was all completely unique characters, but they kind of would feel a little bit like riffed on the hot properties of the time.
While Ambassador Magma was a hit, it was also Tezuka's baby. He still retained the rights to the character. If P-Pro was going to make it, they would have to come up with their own characters and worlds. And in 1967, they would release Kaiju Prince.
Because it's like this little Tarzan kid who's living on this island, and there's like aliens attacking the island. So he protects the island from these aliens with his giant boomerang and his his sibling. That's not it's like his adoptive sibling that's like this brontosaurus that breathes fire named Nessie. And I thought it was just going to take place on the island, but no, the JSDF gets involved, and he like forms a bond with these JSDF soldiers, and like they consider him to be one of the guys, and this whole thing with his long lost family. It's an overarching narrative.
Yeah,
like if you miss an episode, you're gonna be lost.
Rare for that time, especially.
Kaiju Prince was already pushing for more narrative-heavy television at the time, and while I'm sure it was all the rage, it was overshadowed by their next series. In 1971, P-Pro would release Specter Man, and it would prove to be their most well-known TV series. Specter Man is a hero from space, saving the Earth from a simian threat week by week. The series ran for 63 episodes and proved to be so popular that it even got an English dub around the time of its release.
Specter Man! Specter Man! In a flash, like a flame, faster than a plane, a mystery with the name Specter Man.
While it might appear to be an Ultraman knockoff on the surface, Specter Man has plenty of merits on its own. In fact, it actually reflected a lot of the contemporary environmental concerns of the 70s.
The bad guy hates humanity because they polluted the earth too much. And the main characters are part of a political activism group that's about trying to get companies to stop dumping waste into the Tokyo Bay.
P-Pro would follow up Specter Man with Lion Maru, which, even by today's standards, is a totally experimental series. Part Japanese period piece, part Henshin Hiro, Lion Maru takes place in feudal Japan and stars its titular lion-headed hero. The series would prove to be so popular that it got an entire sequel series made of it. For their next television show, they would move away from feudal Japan and lions into contemporary Japan and tigers, with Tetsujin Tiger 7. In a similar vein to Kamen Rider, Tiger 7 is a motorcycle-riding misunderstood hero, fighting against the evil Mu Empire. The series is notable for being extremely dark at times, even ending with its main character having only days left to live, racing out into the horizon, vowing to live his last days to its fullest.
Go!
Rounding out the P-production reign of tokusatsu television, we have Denjin Zabogar, a Tetsujin-like buddy robo that faithfully follows the orders of his pal Yutaka Daimon, as they fight the evil Sigma Gang and later the Dinosaur Army. However, it seems that around 1975, P-Pro cut down their tokusatsu output. The only post-75 show that made it to air was Boken Rockbat, which was made up entirely of 5-minute-long episodes. Still, P-production in the early 70s remains an interesting time capsule of experimental tokusatsu filmmaking.
These characters are kind of unique, and they're all under this Pete Pro umbrella, and they all have a unique approach.
Post-1980s, nothing was being made by P-production. It actually still exists, and is actually owned by the music composer for Evangelion. But now it's basically just a shell to hold the rights to these characters should anyone want to license them out. And so far, there's been a few revival attempts. In 2006, there was a modern update to Lion Maru, called Lion Maru G. Considerably darker in tone and content, G is probably closer to Garo than it is the original. But the most well-known is the 2011 remake of Zabogar, directed by the one and only schlock auteur, Noboru Iguchi. If you're familiar with that name, then it should give you an idea of just how much the Zabogar movie revels in its absurdity and stupidity. It's a dumb movie, but it is aware of how dumb it is, or at least I hope it is. Finally, there's one extremely recent revival attempt that's going to be the main focus of this video. In 2022, a 5-issue American comic book series was released, with each issue focusing on a different P-production character. And this series was one that I became personally involved with. Just last year, an anthology comic book starring the P-production characters wrapped up its 5th and final issue, which was about Specter Man himself. The project was titled Specter Man Heroes, and each issue examines one of the P-production characters, including Hyoman, who is just a television pilot that they never actually ended up doing anything with. Like, this grouping of shows from the 70s getting a modern-day revival is weird enough, But when you consider that this is an American comic book series, then it's really surprising that Specter Man Heroes exists at all. There's only one man that really could have pulled something like this together, and that's the aforementioned Matt Frank. Matt Frank already had the experience of revitalizing old Japanese properties with his amazing Red Man comic. If you haven't read it, you really need to pick up an issue now. It's an amazing way to reinvent and examine a character that had very little backstory to begin with. Stories like this are Matt's passion, which is why it was him and his friend Hiroshi Kanatani who were the ones to reach out to P-Pro for the license.
So I've been working a little bit with another buddy of mine, Hiroshi Kanatani, who's he's a manga artist based out of Japan. We managed to, line up and we started talking about working together, collaborating on stuff. One of the projects that we were kind of pitching back and forth was doing something with the Peep Productions characters. Kanatani-san knew the folks who, or he had contacts with the folks who had the license for all the Peep Pro stuff. And through his contact, we were able to help get a meeting together with myself and my publisher in Japan, Phase 6, my primary publisher, and the license holder.
P-Pro agreed to let Matt and Kanatani use any characters that they had created, except for Ambassador Magma. Tezuka's estate had that on lockdown. But P-Pro seemed happy to lend out its characters to another creative team.
So we just had a meeting and it just threw some ideas around of like, oh, well, I've got a couple of ideas and Kanatani-san has some ideas. And they were very much like, okay, like really you guys can do whatever you want, just as long as you're not presenting the characters in like a negative light, just don't anything stupid. And I think more than anything, they were mostly surprised that an American was at all interested. Which I get that a lot when I'm in Japan and people are like, oh, so you're like a fan, so you like know this stuff. And I'm like, yeah.
Luckily, Matt had already worked with a comic publisher in Japan. However, overseas, it would be a challenge to sell a book that was almost exclusively targeted at Japanese nostalgia. But, as luck would have it, there was a publisher right here in his own hometown that would be willing to publish something as niche as this. The famous, and sometimes infamous, comic publisher, Antarctic Press.
They're based out of San Antonio, which is my hometown, and I didn't know that until I realized I kept seeing them at Comic-Cons and stuff in San Antonio and in Texas and in and around Texas. And I was like, where are you guys located? And they're like, oh, we're in San Antonio. And I'm like, oh,
shit.
Okay, you're local boys. So I started talking with them a little bit. They're good people. They're all nice guys. I like working with them and stuff. So let's give this a go.
For those of you that don't know, Antarctic Press has been around since the 80s, publishing literally anything and everything, with all of its properties being creator-owned. This approach has led them to publish some fantastic things, and some not-so-great stuff. But regardless, I think their heart's in the right place, and in general, they've shied away from publishing the more controversial comics in recent years. Mostly. However, they were extremely enthusiastic about the Specter Man Heroes project, announcing it early on their Facebook page and putting out a call to artists and writers who wanted to work on it. And one of those writers who ended up working on Specter Man Heroes was me. Now, after emailing Antarctic Press, I got a reply back from the company's co-founder, Ben Dunn.
Well, my name is Ben Dunn. I immigrated from Taiwan, 1965. Started Antarctic Press in 1985. Still around, even today, still publishing. We've never stopped putting out comics. And we're almost celebrating our 40th anniversary coming up.
Ben was my main point of contact throughout all this. In fact, I knew Matt Frank was involved, but I literally had no idea that he spearheaded this P production revival. At the time that I was getting involved, things were still up in the air. In fact, the project wasn't even called Specter Man Heroes. Instead, it was titled Henshinverse.
Yeah, originally they were just going to be standalone stories, and the idea was being thrown around that it wasn't even going to have Specter Man in the title. And I saw that, and I was like, no one's going to know what P-Pro Heroes is.
Yeah.
I know what that, like you said, the 5 people who know what that is. But Specter Man is the franchise that people are at least somewhat aware of.
There's a thing in the back of their head that goes like, Zone Fighter, and then they go, Specter Man.
There's a tingle in the back of your brain that tells you that, okay, this is a character. So I thought in order to connect all the issues, that was where I came up with the idea of like doing an introductory page for each story.
It took some time to hammer out the details, thanks in no small part to a worldwide pandemic. But still, I think people were still pretty enthusiastic to be working on this.
Absolutely. I mean, I was familiar with all of them, especially Specter Man. I mean, when I went back to Taiwan in the 70s, I discovered the bootleg manga there, and that's how I got to know the character. You know, I bought a bunch of his manga, and that was it was ironic because I never thought I would ever actually be able to come in contact with doing Specter Man, to be honest. And here it is.
So after some back and forth with Ben, I was eventually extended an offer to write an issue centering on Tiger 7. It was my lifelong dream. I had always wanted to write Tiger 7 since I was a small little lad. I had no idea who this was. Tiger 7 was completely unknown to me at the time, but I didn't want to half-ass what was literally going to be my first comic book. And I was excited. Even if it wasn't a character that I was familiar with, writing for an established character with backstory and history can still be a fun exercise.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun doing other people's IPs, especially on characters that you've grown up with and really like, but in the end, you don't actually own any of it, so it's fun. It's like, like a one-night stand, really.
So I did my due diligence and watched every subtitled episode of Tiger 7 that I could find, and then watched a handful of unsubtitled episodes for good measure, and it was actually pretty fun. As mentioned before, Tiger 7 is basically P-Pro's Kamen Rider. Writing Kamen Rider in any shape or form has actually been a long-time dream of mine, so I approached Tiger 7 with that in mind. But specifically, episode 13 of the original Kamen Rider. You see, in this episode, Kamen Rider Ichigo fights a monster army made up entirely of reused suits from the previous 13 episodes. What was a great way to get around an actor's stunt injury became, in my opinion, one of the best episodes of the original series, and I wanted to replicate that with Tiger 7's Ancient Monster Rogues. But there's one other influence I had while writing, and that was an American comic series called Astro City. Astro City takes superhero stories and tells them from the point of view of an everyday person. What I wanted to do was tell an episode of a tokusatsu television show entirely from the point of view of someone that wasn't the title hero. And once I was done writing, I sent it off to Ben, got some positive feedback with only a few notes. After making those corrections, I was thanked and paid, and I heard nothing for some time. Until November of 2022, when Specter Man Heroes Tiger 7 was officially listed on comic book sites. Without even really realizing it, I had become an actual comic book writer. Now, I wanted this video to coincide with the release of my Tiger 7 issue, but by the time I knew the release date, I knew I wouldn't be able to make a video in that amount of time. Not to mention, the collected trade was already out in Japanese, which was the only version I could get my hands on. But still, I wanted something more for this video than to tell you, oh, I wrote a thing, here it is. I wanted to draw attention to P Production and the Specter Man Heroes series as a whole, because I think cross-cultural oddities like this are neat, and I was happy to be a part of one. But I needed more information on Specter Man Heroes on P-Pro, and so that's why I decided to interview Ben Dunn and Matt Frank for this. However, there's one thing I neglected to mention. When interviewing Matt, I had no idea he was the main creative force behind Specter Man Heroes, and he had no idea that I wrote the Tiger 7 issue. Now, this was entirely intentional. In fact, my business email doesn't even display my last name, so it wasn't likely he was going to find out that I was involved just from that. But in any case, I decided that the funniest possible thing to do would be to tell Matt that I wrote Tiger 7 halfway through our interview.
So, for the issues, have you like read through the individual ones that you were like less involved with, at all?
If I'm being 100% honest, I have skimmed them because, again, I've been going through a lot of transitions in my work and my home life,
yeah.
especially coming out of the pandemic. So actually sitting down to read each issue has been kind of hard. I actually have a pile of comics over here that I have not cracked into yet. It's really hard to sit down and just read. And I did read the script for, I remember sitting down and reading the script for Tiger 7 and really liking the script.
Really? You liked it?
Yeah. Yeah, I remembered liking it when I read the script. I don't know how much of it changed, but I also,
as far as I can tell
I also
from the Japanese version, not much of it changed.
Well, well, the other problem is that the only version I have of all 5 issues is the Japanese issue. I probably should have led with that
This one.
because
Hey, that's me too. The only reason that I can read this is because I wrote the Tiger 7 script. So I can just compare to that and what the Japanese says.
Well, there you go.
Now, was it fair for me to spring this surprise on someone that took the time out of their day to sit and have me barrage them with a bunch of questions? Probably not. But it was interesting hearing events in my life from a completely unrelated perspective.
The first time that I ever heard about this whole project was Antarctic Press just posted on Facebook like, hey, is anybody interested in this?
That was Ben posting that,
Yes,
right?
that was Ben. That was Ben.
Yeah, I kind of had to grab him by the ear and be like, talk to you. I don't think Ben knew that we had most of the stories locked in. Like, we had most of the creative team already locked in. And that's why I was like, okay, so we need to, like, find somewhere to put these new people that Ben's bringing in. Give him Tiger 7.
But once he knew that I was the Tiger 7 guy, Matt actually said some incredibly nice things.
I remembered very specifically going on a walk to read it on my phone because I wanted to make sure that I took time to have any notes, and it's easier for me to concentrate if my feet are moving sometimes.
Hey, I understand completely.
But I went and I walked around with it, and I remember thinking, like, this is good. Like, it actually was kind of the kick in the ass that I needed in order to really get the script going on Specter Man.
Oh man, I mean, you don't need to compliment. You can tell me it's shit. It's
No,
fine.
I'm being honest. I'm being really honest. I remembered being very sweaty because it's Texas and it's really hot here.
Oh yeah.
And it was and I just remembered that I have that memory of like reading the script and then looking up and being like, where am I? Because I had like walked like down through the neighborhood past the mailboxes to the walking trail where there's like a green belt that leads to like a pond, like a big water retention pond, and then there's like another neighborhood over there, and I think I was in that neighborhood by the time I realized that I was done reading. But that's really funny. Yeah, no, that's what I liked about it, was that it was from the point of view of characters who were not the core cast. And I really liked that approach, and that kind of, I think, informed some of how I did Specter Man. I'm almost a little hesitant to read the comic version. Not that I think the art is bad or anything. The art's fun. The art's great. But it's like, oh, that's going to contradict the movie I saw in my head, though. I was genuinely impressed with the attention to detail, genuinely, in the script, and just being like, I really saw the movie in my head.
So consider that an endorsement to go out and buy Specter Man Heroes Tiger 7, and only that issue. Or if you want a variety of boundary-pushing and experimental tokusatsu heroes reinterpreted and reinvented for modern artists by a collection of talent across the comic book industry, pick up the collected volume of Specter Man Heroes. I really don't want to downplay how neat it is to see these characters brought back to life and just redone in a modern American comic book style. And Hiroshi Kanatani's art is fantastic. You can tell that he really was a fan of all these guys just by how much attention is put onto making them feel like the rubber suits of the original show. And if you want your own copy of Specter Man Heroes in English, you can donate to Antarctic Press's Kickstarter campaign. Seriously, I don't usually do this, but this is a Kickstarter that you don't really have to be afraid of losing out on. Antarctic Press is a very capable company. They've published plenty of things before. This is really just to upfront the cost of such a niche book. And I might be biased, but I'd say it's definitely worth it. That was it. It was a 20-minute long ad for a book that I helped write, and I tricked you into watching it. Gotcha. Regardless of my newfound bias for P-production, I think even on its own, it was an interesting time for Tokusatsu. These were shows ahead of their time in a lot of ways, and as a group, there's so much variety and experimentation going on between each one. I'd be really interested to see where these series and characters show up next, whether it be in TV shows, movies, or even comic books.